Hey Philip, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you having the time to have this discussion with us. Um, when we were talking about setting up this conversation, you used an analogy of revenue managers would be like driving a car, but only using the rear view mirror. You also used a phrase as well, which was the same time last year is dead. So, to get the conversation going, what I want to do is pass it over to you. What do you mean by driving in the rear view mirror and the same time last year is dead? What are the problems that you see still exist out in the industry?
Thank you for having me today and for that introduction. Same time last year is dead. That's what we see as a new development in revenue management technology. Currently, systems out there are using the trend line of a data set and they are looking at past data to project the future. This is not wrong and it will come to a result, but it is not taken into consideration the affecting attributes of surrounding data sets and other influencing factors on your business. And that's why the metaphor driving a car by just looking into the rear mirror and comparing the day over day over day with same time last year with day by day of week comparison. This is wrong. This is not the future anymore because a Wednesday can resemble to a Tuesday in November and a Monday in March. And this is over to the AI to understand the influencing factors and not to a human like matrix we enforce the data on. So this is the point. Same time last year is that.
Okay, so that makes sense. So what you're saying is if you are comparing just to a particular date, then you don't have the context of what was happening on that same date last year. I guess to illustrate this with a really obvious example, the Champions League final was held in Munich this year, and that would have influenced prices of hotels. But if we just compared to the same date last year, that would be different because we're comparing to a particular date, but without the context of what was happening at that given time.
Absolutely correct. And this example you have there is a very obvious one because it's got like a painted red flag on that day because of the event happening. And now imagine taking the Champions League, you play on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday. And so already the Wednesday can resemble to the last match's Tuesday. And if you take this as a bigger picture, you have influencing attributes for every day, and only an AI can understand the correlation of these thousands of data sets. So looking at especially ARIS now, our system, our AI that is fed with all these data sets every day, it will understand the affecting parts, and they are changing from day to day, from situation to situation. If the market's prices are higher, if the market is lower, if whatever event happened or not happened, search volumes, announcements being made, different nationalities being able to travel or which are then afraid to travel or are traveling somewhere else. And these are the things that we should not try to put into human metrics like segments. Segments is another good example. It is needed for us to understand the business mix and to understand sales actions and to derive some actions. But the segment itself, underneath it, that's what we call the iceberg principle. Underneath, there's the raw data, and an AI shall always interpret the raw data and not try to interpret something human made, because then all the nice attributes, all these influencing factors, we have erased them. We have already put it into buckets, but let's let the AI put it into its own buckets and understand what's the effect.
So when you guys talk about these multiple sources of data, and you've given some examples there, have you guys looked at the kind of combining those and drawing correlations? How do you do that?
Absolutely. So again, let me take the usual standard is that RMSs work on internal data and they might get a rate feed. So the minimum available price per competitor per day. And this is, for example, there you already miss 20 attributes, which cancellation policy, which room type, which level in the pricing, are there other promotions available, and so on and so forth. And these additional affecting attributes, this is where the magic is happening. And for example, what we take is the obvious ones, so events and reputation data, quality, value for money perception. But not only this, also meta search information, transactions on the own website, requests, location. We have this called feature engineering. So we have created a location map basically, and the distance to the venues in your city. Because very simple again, if you have a concert, the hotels around the concert venue will be booked first, obviously, because you don't want to walk too far. So the hotels, if you're on the other side of the city, this is affecting you. There is a correlation to the distance to the venue. And all of this goes into ARIS, and it will understand the dynamics of every day, of every event, of the Champions League final, and so on, the overflow of a city. And that's really where the future is.
Now that makes sense. Now, I know you've used the analogy before of an iceberg, and I'm getting the tip of the iceberg refers to what we see, but under the part of the iceberg under the water relates to the sources of data that maybe we're not taking into account. I mean, from your perspective, as a percentage, how big is the tip of the iceberg compared to that under the water?
Oh, it's really like a real iceberg. So I would say maybe 30 to 70 or even more, 20 to 80. The point here is what is actually needed for us humans. I mean, we need segments, yeah, for our sales and some strategy. We're using a couple of reports, and we are looking at those big comparisons. Like same time last year, obviously, which is a comparison. I'm not saying we will never use it again, but it is just the value. And this is basically it, what you need. And in the future, what you're interested in, you will let the machines do the work. And this is what is changing at the moment. Machines will stop doing the work on the visible, on the top of the iceberg. They will be fed with all the raw data and doing their interpretation, correlation, combination of data. This will be done on another level, that it's unbiased, where the top of the iceberg is biased because it's what we see, what we want to see. Yeah, this is a very, very good point as well. The wanting to see. The computer will be unbiased, working with the raw data. So it's a big multiple.
So I know that you've been working on a product called ARIS, ARIS. I'm guessing that's an acronym for something.
Yes, absolutely. It's an acronym. First of all, ARIS, the word itself, it comes from the Greek mythology, and it's the Greek god of war. War is bad, absolutely, but ARIS, as a metaphor, is fighting for your revenue, is fighting for the best market positioning, for the best optimum price, and it stands for Automated Revenue Intelligence System. And it's basically doing that job in correlating all that data, and it's the name of our AI.
So this is where technology is better in some ways than the human, because it can pull in and interrogate huge, vast volumes of data. But how do I actually use it? How does ARIS take this data, either the data that I've defined or the raw data, and then enable me to develop my strategy, whether or not I'm looking at my internal data as opposed to market data. Maybe I have a volume rather than price strategy. How do I actually utilize this tool?
Yeah. So first of all, the good news is that as a hotelier, you don't have to do anything. You have to do, well, anything is the wrong word. You have to do some mappings, but the setup can be done in half an hour, in an hour, some room type mapping. So some logical connection of your data streams. And then the AI is trained fully automatic, and you get a so-called model for your hotel. When you kick off, this model is retrained every week. It's like a child learning to walk. So you teach it to walk, to walk, to walk. At some stage, after a couple of months, it knows all the paths, and you can put it on a new path. You can let it walk on a trail through the forest. It will not fall anymore. It will understand there's a route. It can walk over it. So metaphorically speaking, what is happening here, that model is evolving over time, and it's understanding your dynamics, and it will produce several outputs. Under the surface, it's a multi-model and so on, but let's skip the tech side here a bit. So you will get a market demand forecast, a performance forecast, some rate recommendation, and so on. And this will be shown in the system as an output, and you can use this recommendation to either adjust it or to put it into a rate code, to do derivations and things like that. So it's really a price output based on all that data streams adjusted to your hotel. And this is also a difference. It's one model per hotel, or actually a multi-model per hotel, so that a resort can use the same logic, same ARIS logic, but it has its own model, and a hostel has its own model with different correlations and different markets. Every hotel gets its own model. And then what we have also added to ARIS is a human interface. So you can, as a human, as a revenue manager, as a general manager, you can tell it a bit what you want. You can tell ARIS, try to optimize on rate. I want a high rate, and you can rather sacrifice some bookings, rather skip them, have a high rate, or vice versa. I want volume. I want my hotel to be fully booked. If you don't touch these settings at all, it will try to fill the best possible way. It will optimize your RevPAR, and it will progressively sell. So it will not jump around, things like that. It will understand your dynamic, and it will follow this price nicely to optimize it. There are a couple of things that you can tell it. Some preferred positioning, some ratios if you want to fine tune it. But in general, it's working fully automated.
Okay, I just very quickly, as I probably should have done this at the beginning actually, but can you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, you are not just some tech guy that came up with an idea. I mean, this is grounded in solid experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. So first of all, in my first life, I studied air and space engineering. I wanted to become an astronaut. So that's my tech side. I speak their language. And my career was in hospitality. I used to be an area director of revenue for a luxury chain. And during this time, for many, many years, during these times, I was remembering my tech knowledge, my tech foundation. And we said, there's so much you can do still in our lovely industry. So we sat together, we founded Hotellistat nearly 10 years ago now, and that was the mission. And I consider myself as sort of the middleman between tech and hospitality, because I know what hoteliers want, and I can translate this into tech words and tell the techies how to actually do these things.
No, thank you for that. And I just felt it was important to put some context on this, because there's a great deal of relevant and pragmatic experience that has helped to shape this solution. So just for a moment, as we come towards the end of our conversation, I'd like you to go back into your previous experience, But then using that, look at the world as it is at the moment, and ask yourself the questions: if I'm still driving through the rearview mirror, and if I am still applying the same time last year approach, what is it costing me in terms of missed opportunities? What am I losing out on? And what could I be gaining if I was to adopt a more modern approach?
Well, first of all, driving even with the rear mirror is better than not driving. So if you do it, if you use it, it's better than nothing. So static rates and so on, this is really for the past. It's a nice metaphor, actually. So what's the opportunity cost here? It's actually if you want to change that principle, you have to put your eyes away from the rear mirror, look at the windshield, and maybe take an exit. So this, you might actually really have to change the way you think, some operational procedures. And in particular, this means bit changing the distribution. So adding maybe some new rate codes that you can really adjust some channels, open, close, and so on, have a different rate on your own website versus OTAs and so on, supplements, things like that. So it will take some time, but, and here's the but, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, interfaces were still more protected, it was more closed and so on. It has become so easy now to just connect and do these things. So it will require some commitment and engagement, but it is not as like a massive change as it used to be. So it has become much easier. One requirement is to have a nice PMS that is having or offering this connectivity. So legacy systems are hard to use or harder to use for that. So this is a requirement, but the cost is not big, and it will pay back in time for sure, and in money in terms of you will have higher revenues. That's for sure, because you can't be as good as a computer. It's not possible.
And to pick up on that last point about not being as good as a computer and leaning to your ARIS solution, it's because just the volume of data being pulled in to contextualize and to help with those recommendations is vast. I mean, as humans, we have to put things in an orderly way for us to be able to evaluate and compare and draw conclusions. Whereas AI is able to look at just reams of data and do that in a very different way and present you with those recommendations and that analysis.
Absolutely. And there's a nice figure that is really, really expressing that. In Excel, you have a maximum amount of rows of 1,048,000 and something. I will never forget this figure. Forget about 1,048,000 rows. You cannot do this analysis anymore in Excel. You have to use systems, databases, because it's coming to an end. That's really the point.
Perfect. And as you say, it's coming to an end, so is our conversation coming to an end. As you mentioned, hoteliers are in a battle. And to win that war, you want to have the most sophisticated tools, weapons available to you to be able to do that. If everyone else in the market is adopting the same old philosophy, and you can take on board a piece of technology that could give you that competitive advantage, then it should be easy to see how this is most likely going to increase your revenue, which could go a long way to recouping your investment in the solution in a short to medium time frame. Really want to thank you for your time, your insights, and for explaining how ARIS works and highlighting the value for hoteliers. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for watching, and I hope the conversation was of interest. Please do feel free to suggest any topics that you would like discussed in future videos. We're always open to suggestions. And if you missed any of our previous discussions, here is a link to our last video. Here is a link to our Expert Insights playlist, and here is the button so you can subscribe. Thank you once more, and I hope you will join us again in the future. Goodbye for now.